Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Diamond Pass podcast here on this Wednesday, April 1st edition. Happy April Fools. Um, be careful what you see on the internet today, as Julian Edelman already declared he is coming out of retirement. I think he does that every year. It gets a little stale, Julian. Let's change it up a bit. But I'm Jack Foster, joined alongside Ryan Schumpert, as always, coming at you here to talk about Tennessee baseball's recent series sweep. They were on the wrong end of a sweep to Vanderbilt in Nashville, a truly devastating series that saw Tennessee get walked off not once, not twice, but 3 times, all 3 games ending in walk-off wins for the Vandy boys. Tennessee bounces back with a nice little midweek win over Austin Peay, but much to discuss. There's injuries. There's just big storylines going on around this team right now, Ryan. But first, how you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's I feel like I'm parachuting back into baseball it's certainly an interesting time, but
Yeah.
yeah, a pretty brutal weekend for Tennessee in the Mid-State, and it puts a good deal of pressure on them this week as they host LSU.
Right. And I mentioned big storylines, and one of the biggest happened yesterday. We knew that Stone Lawless was injured and there was going to be an update there, but something that we didn't, particularly foresee coming yesterday was Josh Elander's decision to move into the dugout full time, no longer coaching third base for the first time since he's been at Tennessee here for a very long time. And Craig Bell will take over third base duties. He did not coach third base against Austin Peay due to sickness, but typically, from here on out, Craig Bell will be at third. Ross Kivett staying in his role of first base coach. But the big story, of course, Josh Elander in the dugout full time. I think fans are pleased to see this. I think it makes a lot of sense. But what is your initial reaction to that news, Ryan?
Yeah, I think I was a little bit surprised by it. Just how, to me, it felt like we got to the point where it was like, all right, this is going to be an off-season storyline for Tennessee, that Josh Elander is going to say, all right, I'm not going to coach third again next season. But I think it's a credit to him for addressing it earlier than that, addressing it, as soon as he decided that, all right, you need to make a change here. And I do think it's a good decision for a lot of the reasons he talked about, just like communication level. And he talked about some of that with the players and Tennessee's hitters and stuff like that. I think probably more important with Tennessee pitching coach Josh Reynolds, you're talking about another guy that, even though he has pitching coach experience, not in this league, and this is his first year as the pitching coach at Tennessee. So another guy that's kind of new to the job, just for those guys being able to communicate more frequently or consistently while Tennessee's batting, I do think is a big plus. I mean, Elander talked about that Tuesday, that, you're making all these contingency plans before he goes out there to coach third base. So if we're going to do this happens, or that, if that happens, it just seems like this takes a little bit off his plate and can, allow him to focus more and communicate more consistently on some of those pitching decisions with Josh Reynolds.
And Tim Corbin coaches third, and there's another one as well in the SEC too, right? Is it Kentucky's coach?
That sounds right. I don't know that for a fact, but that does sound right.
From Kentucky. So I could be wrong, but I do know that the other coaches that coach third in the SEC, of course, Tim Corbin being the most prevalent, they are in the left dugout. So Tennessee does not have the left dugout in LNS. And Josh is so far away. And, of course, they can't just change which dugout they use. They have to change the entire facility a little bit. It's connected to what they got going on, in the building. So I think that hurts maybe Josh a little bit more than some other third base coaches that are also head coaches, because it's built around that, right? Like they had that, they knew that was the reality going in. This is a new thing. Josh Elander being the head coach and also coaching third. Of course, Tony didn't do that. So I think that always kind of caused a little bit of a hurdle, and that is now gone. I like the news for Tennessee's sake. I think it will ultimately help, and it will allow Josh to be a little bit more comfortable in his role. How much of an impact does it make? I think that could have been a little bit overblown by fans in terms of, hey, if this team would be way better if Josh was in the dugout. I don't know if it's that stark of a difference, but I do think it will help Tennessee. But Ryan, let's move on to the injury situation, which we also learned a little bit more about yesterday. Very, unfortunate situation for Stone Lawless, who, more than what he can provide you on the field from a catching standpoint, from a hitting standpoint, especially as of late, he's kind of the heartbeat of this team, or at least one of them, one of the leaders to this group. I mean, he traveled to Omaha as a
Yeah.
catcher because he was such a great locker room guy, and the people loved having him around so much. Now in year 3 with the program, his season's derailed a bit by taking an 89-mile-an-hour pitch off the face in that eye, nose area. He's got, the orbital bone injury, fractured nose, but the swelling right now is just too much to completely diagnose what needs to happen for him, whether it's surgery or whatever. But um, out for the foreseeable future is Stone Lawless, Brian.
Yeah, Josh Elander said they won't know for sure how long he's out until some of the swelling goes down and they're able to kind of fully get the feel for the entire injury and stuff like that, and what the next steps are going to be moving forward. The hope is that it won't take surgery, and
Mhm.
that it'll just heal in time. But again, I think that's still on the table at this point. So scary situation. I think first things first. Just good that it wasn't worse, because it certainly seemed like it could have been a lot worse. But definitely a loss for Tennessee. I mean, I think the good news aspect of it is Tennessee has a bunch of other options at catcher that are pretty capable. The bad news is this is the guy they felt the most confident with, the catcher, and um, had honestly been one of their better hitters in SEC play. At least one of the
Yep.
feels like few guys in this lineup that provided legit pop and power into it. And we'll see when and if he's able to get back to the season. But certainly Tennessee's going to be going through the bulk of the rest of their SEC play with Lawless not available.
Well, in the first game with Stone not available, Garrett Wright catches for the first time this year. We know he's not been able to catch due to recovery from that hamate bone surgery. Of course, it forces the issue a little bit on Tuesday, but Garrett Wright catching, I think, was very encouraging because he's ready to do that. And look, Tennessee has 3 guys that can play back there, 2 who have a lot of college experience, or I say a lot, enough college experience, and Wright, of course, and Levi Clark, who has caught a handful of games for Tennessee this year, all but one Sunday. I would imagine Levi stays in that Sunday role. I think the question, Ryan, is does Garrett Wright just go into starting 2 times on a weekend right now at catcher, or does Levi take Friday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, and Garrett Wright do the other? Because I feel like it'll be them 2. I know Trent Grinlinger can catch, but still, I think now that Wright is able to, Tennessee will opt to use Wright and Clark, of course, more than Grinlinger behind the plate.
Yeah, I agree. And Josh Elander basically said as much on Tuesday that, Grinlinger would likely get some opportunities in midweek games to catch, but
Mhm.
in weekend games, they would probably roll with those 2 guys. And, I do think it is a very interesting situation. And that I think Garrett Wright is probably a little bit better defensively behind the plate, but I think it disrupts more of what Tennessee has going on, or at least it gives them more limited options. Either gives them more limited options, or it's going to disrupt a lot if Garrett Wright is
Mhm.
catching, and how that affects everything else in the lineup if he's not playing center field, as opposed to Levi Clark, who, if he's catching and not playing first base, we've already seen that. It's a pretty simple
Easy.
situation. Blake Grimmer just goes over and plays first base. From that aspect, that maybe makes me think that it would be more likely to be Levi. But I think those 2 things are kind of contrasting a little bit. Not that Levi is not fully capable behind the plate, but I do think Wright is a bit better defensively, which it presents an interesting situation. It'll be curious to kind of see how Elander manages.
From your recollection, was it pretty even in terms of how much Wright or Clark caught in the fall?
I
Behind Stone, like reps wise? Do you
I
remember?
would think Wright caught more,
Yeah.
because in
So,
you say, like, behind Stone. Well, all these things were at our inter squad scrimmages, so there's 2 guys catching.
yeah, right.
So, Levi got a lot of work too. It's not to say that he didn't work there, but to me, it felt like Levi was getting a lot of work at first base in the fall, because that was a position he hadn't played a ton and was going to play a lot this year. And Wright played in the outfield and stuff too, but it felt like he got, still the bulk of his work at catcher.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is just pitcher familiarity, right? Because we know
Yes.
Blanco's familiar with Clark. That's not going to change. But like I said, the question is who catches twice on a weekend, and maybe if Landon Mack is more comfortable with one or the other, or Brandon Arvidsson is, or Coons, or whatever it is, Appenzeller. So of these pitchers who could start for Tennessee, like where's the comfort level there? Maybe it's more so with Wright leading to the fact that he could start twice. But we'll see. Something to keep an eye on. But like you said, the good news for Tennessee is that they have options here. They're not going to have to roll out, some guy who's barely played who has been inefficient at the plate. Like also, all three of these guys have done something at the plate. We know Levi Clark struggled, but he's one of the more talented hitters on the roster. Trent Grindlinger's been on fire as a true freshman, and Garrett Wright has been one of the more consistent bats since he's been healthy for Tennessee. So they're all good hitting options too, I think, in a way.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess I would say, like, to me, and that's a good point about I'll start there. It's a good point about the pitching stuff because Elander kind of said as much. If they'll talk to the pitchers and see,
Mhm.
if there's a little bit more comfort level with one of those guys than the other. You know, I think the con to Garrett Wright catching is like that basically means Jay has to play in center field.
Right.
And he's been struggling, a lot at the plate right now. Um, so, technically, I was trying to do the math or I was trying to run the scenarios in my head. Can you do other things? Yes, but that to me, the only option I came up with, maybe you have something else, would be you'd move Reese Chapman to center, Henry
Mhm.
Ford to right, and then play Grimmer at third. And I think all those guys are capable of playing those positions, but it's just Henry Ford's played third base every game this year. Reese Chapman's played right field basically every game each of the last 2 seasons. You're just moving a lot of guys in the middle of the season out of what they have been very comfortable doing. And, I'm not sure that's something, that's a great idea, but it is an option.
Well, another option I think could be. Let me ask you this question: Who do you like better at second base, Blake Grimmer or Tyler Myatt?
Grimmer.
Okay, so put Grimmer at second and Myatt at right, and Chapman in center. That is another option because Myatt has played outfield.
Yeah.
If he'd played right field specifically, right at Walter State, um,
Yes.
so there's options there, but yeah, look, Reese is a tremendous defensive player. Like, I think Jay can get to more stuff at center. I'm not saying that Reese would be bad in center, but it feels like Tennessee's got a good thing going with its outfield right now. Like with Garrett and Reese, and even Jay in center is great defensively. My thing is if Garrett's going to play catcher, like to lead off, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, and that was a big talking point because Garrett talked to the media. He said that was a big talking point. I think in some ways it might be a little bit good for him because I don't know. Josh Elander said on Tuesday night that after the Georgia series, Garrett Wright said he didn't like hitting leadoff,
Mm,
and that he just he felt like he was having to do too much or like get outside of his comfort zone. And
interesting.
Josh Elander was like, "We just want you to be you. Do everything you're doing. You don't need to see more pitches. Just do what you're doing. Hit the leadoff spot. It's going to be one time a game. After that, it's completely random where you're hitting." And Wright talked about it after the fact. I think he talked after Elander last night, so we were asking him about that. He's like, "Well, it's almost kind of a good thing in the sense that the top half of the first inning, all I'm thinking about is catching. I'm just thinking about the pitcher and us getting through this first inning." So he doesn't have time to necessarily think about putting that pressure on himself. And it's like, I just took my equipment off, went up, got in the, on deck circle to get loose and like didn't have time to think about it. So it is interesting. I'm sure there's cons to it too. But from the standpoint of Garrett Wright, maybe making a little too much out of hitting in the leadoff spot in that Georgia series, I do think it maybe makes some sense for him.
Hey, and I know it's Austin Peay midweek, but the fact that the first pitch after you catch, like the first time you're doing catcher leadoff, the very first pitch you hit for a double. Like
Yeah.
that's got to be a little bit of a confidence builder. Like if this happens Friday, it's like, okay, well, the last time out, I striked the first pitch for a double. So yeah, look, I think Garrett Wright's very resilient player. He can deal with a lot. He's done so much for Tennessee. He's one of my favorite players on the team. So he can do it. It's just a little abnormal that you see that.
Yeah, strange for sure.
Yeah, and maybe Levi catches twice, and it only has to happen once on a weekend. But I like Garrett Wright in leadoff spot, Ryan. I know it's a little bit of a different conversation, but I don't think that should change at all. He makes perfect sense to me as leadoff.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't like the Blake Groomer experiment. That never really made any sense to me. Shea Abernathy, as we talked about, is struggling right now. So,
yeah, I just think he's
to me, it's by far the most logical, most obvious situation.
Well, over the weekend, Ryan, Tennessee got walked off 3 times. That's a hard thing to come back from, and we'll see how they do so against LSU at home. But, it just puts so much more pressure, I think, in terms of how they're going to respond, because you lose in the 10th inning to a walk-off base hit after great pitching from Brandon Arvidsson and Tegan Coons. In the Saturday game, it's the longest game in program history, and my goodness, Cam Appenzeller and Bo Rudy were elite, throwing 9 scoreless innings. They combined to throw a complete game scoreless, if you will. And Tennessee gets walked off in the 16th inning on a squeeze play, bunt down the third base line, and with the bases loaded, 1 out. And that's a heartbreaker. But look, Tennessee comes back Sunday, and the offense explodes. Yes, Blanco and the defense, not great at all, but Tennessee's offense was just doing a little bit better than Vandy's, attacking that poor pitching, score 3 insurance runs in the top of the 9th to lead by 5 going into the bottom of the 9th. 3 outs, and you're out of there salvaging the series with a win. But no, doesn't happen. Nick Abraham, who has not pitched anywhere close to 80 pitches, goes into 87 pitches, single and 2 walks to load the bases. And then Mark Hindy, Braden Krenzel, things spiral for them. 2-run single and a walk-off grand slam for Vandy to sweep the series. Ryan, just like thinking about how insane that series ended for Tennessee, I could not believe it. Like the fact that a 16-inning game happened is crazy in itself. But for the next day to have that type of game where it is totally different than anything you'd seen all weekend long, where both offenses were just teeing off. And it was just, 16 and 15 hits each. Like, there's 31 hits combined in that game. Ridiculous. And for it to end in that fashion, I was speechless. But I guess, I know you can't really answer this, but I guess my question would be how hard it must be, like, to just get back on the bus and to try and recoup and recover from something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think mentally that, it takes a toll. I think it's something that I would typically think it'll be an inflection point one way or the other. It's hard for it not to be. To lose 3 games like that, it just feels like this is a point where the season could go. Yeah, in one
think
of 2
there's nowhere to go
directions.
but up.
See, I disagree with that because the schedule is about to get a whole lot harder, and you can just keep on losing games. And
fair, but I think there's, from an emotional standpoint, like from a just devastation standpoint. Yes, you can keep losing, but like you've had the worst possible thing happen to you already, I think. Like,
I
that's
don't think
freaking bad.
Yeah, from a heartbreak standpoint, I think you're probably right that it can't get much worse than that, really. So it's very, very tough. I mean, as I say, the inflection point thing. I mean, if you want a positive spin on it, I think the positive spin would be Tennessee's lost 6 SEC games. 4 of them basically came down to the last pitch of the game in one way or the other, and a 5th one was extremely close too. So, I think there's an element that you would think just statistically some of this stuff would even out these close games. But as I said, this was the more manageable part of the schedule with Vanderbilt struggling early. Georgia's a good team, but Vanderbilt struggling early. Missouri not very good. LSU struggling here coming to town this weekend. Like, this is where Tennessee kind of needed to, if not make their hay, at least, stay right around 500 in conference play. And now it's going to take, a great weekend against LSU to to be at that 500 spot through the first 4 weekends.
That's what makes it a tougher pill to swallow is because Vanderbilt is not great. Like, they're flawed, and you saw their lack of pitching depth, and to be unable to take at least one, take advantage of that is really tough. Um, Tennessee, I thought, was the better team Saturday in that crazy 16-inning game. Yes, they each scored 5 runs in 1 inning, but given how unbelievably dominant Cam Appenzeller and Bo Rudy were, and that Tennessee threatened more in extras. They got runners on
Yep.
base. They stranded 9 total in extras, 5 in scoring position. So it felt like Tennessee deserved to win that game. Sunday, of course, they did. Friday, maybe, yeah, I think you'd say Vanderbilt was a little bit better just because of how effective Connor Fennell was, and Tennessee could not touch him at all. They were no hit for 5 1/3, right?
Yep.
So it felt like Tennessee was the better team, like in Vanderbilt, and they lose 3. I think that's what makes it a bit tougher. And it was a very gettable series, and you drop that. And like you said, it's with Alabama looking pretty good. Like, they do well against Auburn. They swept Florida. That's going to be a tough series, even in Knoxville. Of course, you have a brutal road trip to Starkville. Texas comes to town later in the year. Um, they got to get at least one this weekend. So, like, 4-11 is not great at all. I think Tennessee was 5-10 in 23, but you obviously can't get swept again.
No, I mean, really, you need to win this series at home if we're being honest about it. Like, if you want to feel like you're still in a good spot to make the NCAA tournament, I think you need to win this series. Not that you can't make the
Yeah.
NCAA tournament if you lose 2 out of 3, but you're going to be giving yourself a lot of work to do the final 6 weeks of conference play if you don't.
Well, let's talk about the starting pitching. Tennessee made a change in its rotation, starting Brandon Arvidsson over Tegan Kuhn's Friday nights. Maybe a little bit of a surprise given how fast it happened. I know Tegan struggled mightily against Missouri, but a bit of a quick hook. And look, Brandon Arvidsson does very well in his starting role, and Tegan Kuhn's is first out of the bullpen, and he does well. Arvidsson 4 hits, 2 runs allowed, struck out 7. Very solid in 5 innings of work. Wasn't stretched out too much, only 86 pitches. Then Tegan Kuhn's comes in, and I thought was incredibly impressive out of the pen. Ultimately gets the loss because he allows the base runner that scores, but Hindi was the one who allowed the hit there to walk it off in the 10th. But this combination, this reverse stack, because we've seen Kuhn's and Arvidsson, now we see Arvidsson and Kuhn's. I know that basketball was happening probably in around the 8th inning is when basketball started for this Friday night game, but I'm curious to see how much you watched and what you thought of this stack here.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch much of Tegan. I watched a good bit of the first handful of innings of the game. I was watching most of Tennessee's no hits in their first 5 innings. But look, like, even though I didn't watch Tegan, like, it's, I think, really impressive what he did. Like, we texted about it. Obviously, the decision was made after we recorded last week. We texted about it. Like, it felt like a risk to move away from Tegan in the starting rotation this early, because you just didn't know what that would mean for him mentally, if he would check out or if he would maybe wither. But no, he did the exact opposite, and that's what made it risky, because Tennessee needs Tegan Kuhn's to be effective for him. Not that he has to be as good as he was against Vanderbilt every week. Certainly would be awesome for Tennessee if he was, but they can't have him being nothing for them. So, it was a risky move, and I think Arvidsson, he pitched well. He, rewarded that move, but Tegan more so. Like, he showed that he's still locked in and in the fight. And I don't know, you were there, so you would have a better outlook on this. Like, it feels like it might have even kind of lit a little bit of a fire under him too.
Yes, I think it did. And look, he comes out and allows back-to-back singles to start the thing. And you're like, oh, what's going to happen here? Then 2 strikeouts and Stone catches a runner. And it was like bang out of the 6th. And then from there, it was cruise control. Did allow 2 runners, lost a long battle to Mancini, who is Vandy's best hitter in the 7th, to allow 2 base runners. Gets out of it with a big out. And then 8th inning, cruise. 9th inning, cruise. And then in the 10th, he's well into his outing. and hits a guy and allows a single to put 2 on, and that did it for him. But, I think the stuff played well. I thought he looked very composed. You mentioned the mental aspect. That was the biggest thing for me, just seeing how he was going to handle something like this. And the fact it was just a clean swap, I thought was probably expected more than any other thing, but still interesting to see that it was just Coons coming out of the bullpen like Arvidsson would on a Friday night first. Maybe this is better because I do think Brandon Arvidsson is a little bit better composed than Teagan on the mound. Like, just not letting anything getting to him, and he's an older guy too. So maybe this allows Teagan to flourish a little bit more if he's coming out of the pen. And we've seen Arvidsson go really long into games, 100+ pitches easy. He did twice last year. So if Arvidsson's shoving, there's no reason to think he can't give you 7 to 8 frames. I don't know. I liked it. And I don't think there's a reason to change it. Josh Elander was non-committal to the starting rotation in Tuesday night's presser. Probably that leads me to think that there could be a change coming on Saturday. But with this Friday combo, the way it worked against Vandy, I don't see a reason to change that after 1 week. Like, to take Arvidsson out of the starting rotation after what happens would be weird to me.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a good lead-in because Elander did, he was non-committal, but he said there's like a good chance or it'll probably mix some things up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how you took that. You think it's going to be a change on Saturday?
Well, look, Blanco almost just had a complete game 2 weeks ago. I know he struggled Sunday, but you really moving him off the day 3 spot? I don't think so. Why you would take Arvidsson out of the starting rotation doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah, I think it has to be Landon Mack moving to the bullpen if there's a change. Now, who's the Saturday starter? Is it Teagan or is it Appenzeller? I think you'd roll with Appenzeller. I mean, dude's just been unbelievably dominant. Like 13 1/3 scoreless in 3 outings of SEC play. He's been their best arm. So, I don't know. Maybe you start him on Saturday and swap your Saturday pitchers, right? Like, you swapped your Friday guys in terms of the order. Do the same with Saturday, I guess. I don't know. But I guess I could see Coons starting Saturday, too, if he wanted to move him back in.
Yeah. It seems, I tend to agree with you. It seems like it would be kind of strange to, Teagan throw so well in the bullpen in that role and then immediately say, all right, we're going to change the role again. Maybe you would see that as an award of sorts for him pitching well. But, yeah, I tend to think that would be the most likely scenario, too. And I kind of go 2 ways with this, where, like, one way, I feel like these stacks have generally been pretty good for him. So why mix them up? But on the other hand, Tennessee keeps losing these games. Tennessee is 2-4 on Saturday, on Friday and Saturday in SEC play so far. So it's not like, maybe I guess it was not the craziest thing in the world to change things up. But I don't necessarily look to the pitching. I don't think the pitching's been their problem in these Friday and Saturday games. It's been the offense.
No, totally. The reason Tennessee's losing games is lack of consistency offensively, and then some bullpen depth pieces haven't performed like they need to. That's the reason. The top end of Tennessee's pitching staff has been really, really good. Appenzeller, Arvidsson, I think just, taking everything into account for this year, Coons has had a mostly solid year. And then Mack, we know he's going to give up hits and get into some trouble, but he's still doing a really good job getting out of it. And, he wasn't bad Saturday. Like, that inning spiraled for him when Vandy scored 4 in the 5th. Tyler Myatt makes the worst defensive mistake of the year. And, then things just compound. Like, that's how it happens, right? In baseball, you see it so many times where, one out guy gets on due to an ugly throwing error. And then, Reese lets a ball go over his glove in right field. So that's uncharacteristic and unlucky. And then you have 2 homers to follow. Like, it should have been 2 outs, none on. And I don't think that happens to Landon Mack in the 4th. But overall, I thought he was decent again Saturday. He's never going to just completely wow you with an outing. He's going to have some ebbs. But look, if Tennessee wants to move him into the bullpen and start Cam Appenzeller, you can't dispute that because of how good Appenzeller has been. Like, it's just overwhelmingly good what he's done. And I do think Mac could play well at the pen too. We talked about it a little bit last week. Like with his energy and his competitiveness and his velo, like that's his strongest trait, right? He can hit 100, and his ability to do well with runners on, um, I think could help Tennessee out of the pen. I know he's not a huge strikeout guy, but I don't know. I'm not saying it would be a bad experiment to do that. And look, if Appenzeller's doing this and he can go 90 to 100 pitches, good lord, like Tennessee could be winning a lot of 2-1, 2-0 ball games on Saturdays.
Yeah, I think there's an element of Appenzeller. Look, he's been Tennessee's best pitcher in SEC play.
Yeah.
Like there's no getting around that. And I think there's two aspects of why you'd move him to the starting rotation. One, he's been your best pitcher. Like why complicate this? Let's get him into a starting spot. Two, if he's where he is on Saturday now, in the scenario where Landon Mack has a good start and goes 6 innings, and he throws 3 innings on Saturday, he can't throw on Sunday. It's not like what they could have potentially done with Arvidsson to start the year, where it's like, okay, he threw 45, 50 pitches on Friday. Well, he can come in and get us an out or two on Sunday if needed. You can't really do that. Like you're with Appenzeller on Saturday, he's kind of locked into just being in that one role. So, I think that part makes sense. I think with Mac too, because you're right. I don't necessarily think of him as a bullpen guy. But the way Tennessee's been doing these stacks, like it's what we said last week. They're just asking 5 to 6 pitchers to get a ton of outs, and it's a lot of long relief. It's not a lot of short rolls. You're going to come in and pitch the 9th inning, or you're going to come in and pitch the 8th inning, or we're going to ask you to get 3 outs. Like it's a lot of, all right, this starter did well. Let's give the ball to Coons now. Let's give the ball to Appenzeller now, and you go as far as you can go. So when you look at it that way, I think Mac, it doesn't make as big of a difference of having him come in the bullpen. I think you're more likely to see a bridge if Appenzeller is pulled in the middle of the inning of them not going directly to Mac. I think that would probably make more sense. But I maybe don't have the reservations about it that I did earlier in the season.
Well, think about it this way too. With how good Appenzeller's been, you're going to say Tennessee's likely going to be in a better spot when he exits the game than when they've been when Mac exits the game. Not that they've been in horrible spots, but Appenzeller's just so good right now. You tend to think that. And also maybe Appenzeller can give you longer outings. Mac's outings aren't terribly long because he allows a lot of base runners, pitch count gets higher, what have you. So if Appenzeller can give you 6, 7 innings most of the time, and you have a solid lead because he's shoved and the offense has been just horrible, maybe you don't go to Mac, or Mac's outing very short in relief on Saturday. You can use him again on Sunday. Like the way it's going right now, you're hardly ever going to be able to use Appenzeller in back-to-back games or more than once in a weekend, right? Because he has to pitch so much on Saturdays when relieving Mac. This way, it could give you potentially more ammo on Sunday out of the pen if Mac can go again after throwing 12 pitches on Saturday night out of the pen. Because Tennessee needs better Sunday bullpen pitching. That is the big thing. They have Friday good, they have Saturday good, but Krenzel, Hindi, they've been far too unreliable. Rudy has turned the corner. He could be very good for Tennessee down the stretch. Of course, was phenomenal against Vandy. But I do think they need a little bit more on Sunday because Blanco, that 7 2/3, it's not going to happen most of the times. That was probably an outlier for how his year is going to go. Don't think he'll be bad, but I do think this move, Ryan, could give them maybe a little bit more flexibility with relief pitching on Sunday too.
Yeah, 100%. It felt like they wanted to stick Krenzel into the role that they have used Appenzeller and Arvidsson. Now Teagan would change on Friday. That just hasn't worked. Like he hasn't been good enough to pitch multiple innings, and in some instances he really hasn't been good enough to even just take over and shut down one inning. So there's no doubt that feels like the biggest. I like still where Tennessee's at with their first 5 pitchers. Finding things after that continues to be rocky. So any way you can maybe use one of those first 4 again on Sunday, like I think you have to look into and try to make happen.
Well, Bo Rudy has to be, definitely ahead of those other guys. I think he is now. for sure after what happened on Friday and Saturday. Look, I know it was a matchup thing, and that's why Elander goes Hindi to Johnstone in the 10th, who ends up walking it off with a base hit. But dude, Rudy comes out and he's just fired up, strikes out Braden Holcomb, who's, Vandy's best power guy at least. And that was his only batter as Elander's playing matchups. Is a little, I'm not going to say weird, but for that to be Mark Hindy's first SEC arm he's faced all year in that moment, like, I don't know. I didn't quite love that decision. But look, the next day, Bo Rudy gets another chance and 9 up, 9 down in 3 innings, all in extras, all high leverage, high intensity stuff. And he's just absolutely shoving. And his energy, I didn't know he had that fire kind of like Mac does, and maybe even more so there in extras that he showed. He was fired up. And even when he gave the ball, to Hindi on Friday night, you saw it too, just him firing Mark up in that moment. Ultimately, Rudy doesn't pitch the 15th and 16th on Saturday. Frederick does, and things go where they go in the 16th. But, Bo Rudy, he's a guy. Like, I think you have to acknowledge that he's got to be a guy, and certainly someone Tennessee trusts more so than Krenzel and Hindi, and he's closer to the other 2 bullpen arms, whoever they are, than what's behind him, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel. I mean, I did my big spiel last week on it. And I immediately felt
wow,
I immediately felt stupid because Bo Rudy, blows the save on Tuesday night against USC Upstate in the 9th inning. But, I think to some of what you're getting at with like his competitive character and his fire, like I think that showed a lot. That after that, he just kind of responds, didn't feel like he lost any confidence, and he responded in a big way Saturday. So, yeah, to me, right now at least, it feels like he should very clearly be the 6. I think there's still reason to trust Brady Frederick in more specific roles, and then it's to me, I think Abraham showed something.
Yes,
and maybe he's more deserving of some opportunities right now, but it's to see if Abraham can replicate some of what he's done, probably on Sunday again, and then try to get Krenzel, especially Krenzel, try to get him right, and hope that Hindi can be a little bit more effective in these short stints.
Yeah, Abraham just pounded the zone, man. Like, he was good. Issued 3 walks and 5 1/3, but 2 came in the 9th. It's like I said, I don't think he had pitched more than 30 in an outing in his career, and he's up in the 80s. Like, he was gassed, dude. Maybe in hindsight, Elander should have given a guy a clean inning in the 9th rather than trotting Abraham back out there. But yeah, that was a gutsy performance from him, and didn't get any help the first inning he was out there, defensive mistakes, but 5 innings 5 through 8 was shutdown dominant, and at least a couple 1, 2, 3 frames mixed in there. But yeah, dude, the fact that Mark Hindi is the guy who gives up the walk-off base hit Friday, and then on Saturday, I know Frederick is kind of the reason the bases, runners get on, but the sack bunt happens, or the squeeze bunt happens against Krenzel. And then on Sunday, Hindi gives up a 2-run single in the final inning before Krenzel gives up the walk-off grand slam. So these 2 arms were kind of like both there at the end when Vandy was walking it off all 3 games. It was tough. They just have to be better if Tennessee's going to rely on them in these moments. And Krenzel, that's the real disappointment, I think. It just feels he hasn't been right since that Georgia outing went totally sideways. It feels like that's maybe rattled him a little bit. And then Hindi, we'd not seen him throw against SEC competition hardly at all. He's been barely used, none in SEC play until this past weekend, and then 2 forgettable outings for him. So I don't really know where the deep end of the bullpen is at right now in terms of pecking order, but Abraham earned more ops. Rudy's got to be significantly higher, and then Frederick, as you said, is the situational guy.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see when and if they go back to Hindi, just because for those to be the first opportunities they've given him and SEC play, and for them, multiple of them not to go well. Like, I don't know, that doesn't seem to bode well for the trust factor there.
And it's disappointing too, because he's the older guy, experienced lefty. Bring him in there in the 10th. The matchup, it works, but it hasn't worked. All right, let's switch gears, talk about Tennessee's offense a bit. Don't have to spend as much time on it. Pretty straightforward weekends, just more, you know, inconsistency, emptiness on Friday and Saturday. Very little offense. No hit through 5 1/3, or through 5 innings, both games. 5 1/3 on Friday against Connor Fennell, who shut down Tennessee. Tennessee combined for 12 hits in 26 innings of baseball
Whew.
in the first 2 games. Yeah. So that kind of, I'm sorry, 14 hits in 26 innings of baseball through the first 2 games of the series. Look, they had the big inning on Saturday where Henry Ford provides the big homer to tie it. What a bounce back that was at the time in the 6th. But then it's just 0-0-0-0. I mean, Tennessee and Vanderbilt were both held scoreless for 9 straight innings. Like, they played 9 innings where nobody scored. It was insane. It was one of the craziest games ever. But of course, it's just more so of the same story. Guys had their moments. Levi Clark, 2 hits in the first game. Garrett Wright had a 3-hit day on Saturday. Pretty much everyone 8 on Sunday. The big story there is that Trent Grenlinger stayed hot, and he can be an option for you. But look, it's just somebody's got to, be just guys have to be more consistent, Ryan. It's kind of hard to pinpoint it here or there. To like Blaine Brown goes 0 for 14 in 3 straight SEC games, then has a 3-hit day on Sunday. Yeah, that's encouraging, but there's just things have to continue. It's like a snowball effect, but in a positive way. Things just have to continue rolling, and at various points for various guys, it comes to a halt, and then there's a slump. It's hard to find any rhythm with this offense right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, it doesn't feel like there's really one spot to pinpoint. Henry Ford, who I think had been the guy that may have been most consistent for them, or through the early part of the season, like, has not been consistent. He was not good enough this weekend. He hasn't been consistent enough in SEC play as a whole. Really, I look at it, I think, like, guys that have been good enough for what Tennessee needs in SEC play at the plate: Garrett Wright, Reese Chapman, Manny Marin.
Right.
It's kind of where the list stops to me.
Yeah. And look,
Stone Lawless.
Yeah, it's like, but even, yeah, I agree with you. But also Reese provides nothing Friday, Saturday before, having a good Sunday. And then Manny kind of has cooled off in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, those guys are everyday players to me, right? Chapman, Marin, Ford still, of course, Brown. He showed you his upside, but yeah, it's just there's not many guys you trust a ton, like.
Well, part of what I say with those guys is like to what I expect, like what they need to provide with where they're hitting in the lineup.
Yeah,
Reese Chapman and Manny Marin aren't hitting like Tennessee needs. They're 2 and 3 hitters to hit. If that was their role, I would say Tennessee still needs a little bit more. But when you're talking about guys hitting, 5, 6, 7 in that range, like, it's, I think, a little bit more acceptable. Second base has been the one spot that to me is just they just are getting absolutely nothing from.
right.
I don't know who you trust, who you go to, because it really hasn't been anybody that's been any good there. So that's the one that feels like you're just getting absolutely nothing. But like you said, I think consistency is just the key word, and not enough consistency, not enough guys being able to stack good days, and not enough guys that on their bad days are going, 1 for 3 with a walk or something like that, or 1 for 4, like giving you something on their bad days. The bad days just feel like they're net zero right now for basically everybody.
Yeah. Blake Grimmer's worked a lot of walks this year. I think you talk about those guys that, you were talking about expectation with that group, but Blake Grimmer's certainly an everyday guy, and he's giving you more than most. His consistency has been at least somewhat solid, and he gets on base. So, obviously you like what you see mostly from him, but the second base conversation, Ryan, Tyler Myatt has pretty much only been good in pinch hit spots. Like, when he starts games, he's just doesn't hardly do anything. And we saw some defensive mistakes from him. Sunday, I haven't mentioned this yet. Just really, really bad defense all around from Tennessee, specifically from the left side of the infield. Henry Ford made some costly mistakes. Manny had some odd plays, but Manny and Myatt struggling to turn double plays has kind of been a continuous theme this year too. I don't know what exactly is going on there. I don't know if Marin has to wait for Myatt too long on these or what that is, what that hangup is. And of course, I mentioned the Myatt throw on Saturday where he dirted it. I think this benefits Ariel Antigua that there's been no one to take the reins
Yeah.
and that there's been some defensive mistakes to happen there too. Doesn't feel smooth with Myatt at second. And Grimmer's probably going to have to be playing first more now with Stone out. So if once Ariel gets healthy, we haven't mentioned it, but he's got that banged up shoulder right now. I think that's why he hasn't had as much playing time as of late, but I kind of think he's going to get opportunities once he's back healthy because look, Tennessee can't afford to make defensive errors, and they've been relatively smooth all year. Sunday was an anomaly, but look what happens on Saturday when Myatt dirts a ball, leads to an inning spiraling for them. And then Sunday was just awful early. Like that third inning where Blanco gives up, where Fendi scores 5 on Blanco, it was all due to Tennessee's defense playing poorly.
Did you see me do an Undertaker Jeff a second ago? Did you
No,
miss
I didn't.
that?
Yeah.
Ariel Antigua.
Yes,
back.
exactly.
I mean, look, like I tease you a little bit because you're such an Ariel guy, but I mean, you're getting nothing. You're getting nothing at the plate from second base.
Right.
So if you're going to get nothing at the plate from second base, why not just go with the guy that's best defensively there? I don't have any issues with that if that's where Tennessee decided to go because they've tried Jay, and it feels like now Jay's going to get opportunities in center field, as we mentioned, because of Garrett Wright having to catch more. So it's not like you're just cutting Jay out of the equation. Myatt continues to just be much, much better as a pinch hitter than he does as a guy in the lineup every day. Chris Newstrom hasn't shown much. So, and you said to think, the point too, Grimmer's not going to be able to play second base as much as they've kind of tinkered with there. So if he's healthy, I don't disagree with any of that. I think it makes some sense.
Right. Look, can he bunt? Can Ariel bunt? Like you could use that, Just work good at bats, dude. That's all they need. Just don't strike out on 3 pitches. All right. Like just work the count. Hopefully you can reach base. If not, we'll live with it. 9-hole. And just when double plays are easily turned and should be turned, turn them. Like it's not very difficult. And Ariel has a ton of talent defensively. The last thing I wanted to mention, and this was Saturday's game. Did you watch the end of Saturday's game by chance?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you saw Stone's bunt with first and third, 1 out. What was your reaction to that?
About Roskiewicz' reaction on first base, where he just slumped down, put his hands on his knees, and looked down at the ground. I mean, my initial thought was that he just bunted without being told to do that, without that being the call. Elander said that was not the case,
right?
Which makes me think Blaine Brown missed a sign on third base because he didn't even get a big secondary lead. Now, it was a bad bunt. I don't think Blaine Brown even on a
the wrong spot.
Yes, if it was a safety squeeze, I don't even think Blaine Brown would have been able to score. But he didn't react like someone that knew a safety squeeze was on. Like he did not get a big secondary lead. So Josh Elander didn't say that. That after Josh Elander said that the call was to bunt, that was my read on the situation. That Blaine missed a signal or something. But it doesn't matter. Again, I don't think even if it was a safety squeeze and not a suicide squeeze, I don't think it would have mattered. I don't think he would have scored on a bunt. Where that location of the bunt was.
Well, Josh said safety. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right, and it's just a weird play. I think at that point, I don't like the call because Stone doesn't bunt a ton, and also if you watch the game, there were so many balls hit into the outfield. It wasn't a lot of rolling over. There was just a ton of flyouts in the game. Stone's a guy who could hit it into the outfield. Like, send a sac fly and let's score a run. Like, to me, that should be the goal there, rather than trying to get cute a little bit. If it's Jay or Manny, these guys have bunted more. I don't know. I didn't love it. The call in general, and Blaine Brown is not. You talk about what went into that. Maybe he messed that up a little bit. He's also made some base running mistakes. Like it hasn't been quite smooth for him on the pads. This is another reason there. But yeah, I would have just liked to see, okay, Stone try to hit one in the infield. I know you have the double play fear, right? Like, that's a real fear in that spot. But I don't know. I think sack fly plan there would have been better and just let him swing at it. But I don't know.
I agree.
I wanted to bring this up though, because it's like what all the fans were talking about, like after Saturday's game. That was a big moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That was the biggest moment. I do think I generally agree with that, and some of it's just bias because we saw what happened when they did try to bunt. Um, I do think Josh Elander has a tendency to get cute at times with stuff like this. I think that's been the case in the past, and in the past, to me, it's made less sense because it's like your offense is amazing. Why are you sacrificing an out to try to get a run? This year, I think some of that stuff makes more sense. The offense is bad. They've struggled. Like you kind of have to play for runs at some point. But even on Friday night, was it the sixth inning when they did? It's runners on first and third with one out. Tennessee's down 2-0, and they do the double still play and give up the out at second base to get the run home. Like I didn't like that. I mean, it ends up working out fine because it's a 2-run game in the sixth inning. You got 3 more cracks at it. Like this is go mode to me. Try to score 2 runs here and tie the game. It ended up working out fine because they were able to score another run and get it. Levi Clark has the big RBI single and get it to extra innings. But I didn't love it then. If that was like the 4th inning, maybe. But I think it was the 6th, maybe the 7th. But
yeah, you nailed it. 1 out, 2 on in the 6th.
Yeah, like it just, and if it was 2 outs, to me, it'd been different too. If it was 2 outs, would have completely made sense to do that move. But you really are banking like Phillips that unlikely that you can either get a sac fly or a hit in one of 2 at bats. And then if you get 2 hits, you get a hit in the gap, you get a home run. Like any of those things are a much better result than scoring to 1 run. So I get why he did it because of the offensive struggles, but I honestly didn't love that call at all.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess you make sense. I don't think I had a problem with it at the time just because of how horrible Tennessee had been that game. It's like, okay, you got to run, but
yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's the point. You're trying to spark something, trying to spark some momentum, even if it doesn't happen in that inning. So that
also curious. Also funny they tried it against Missouri, and Reese ended up being safe because of a horrible throw, even though he kind of messed up the play. They tried again, stop steal. Maybe it's something we see more of from Tennessee. All right, but any final notes from discussing Tennessee Vanderbilt series here, Ryan?
Yeah, I think a general thought, this is just a Josh Elander thought, when we talk about the move to Teagan, or the move to Arvidsson as the Friday night starter, and him deciding not to coach third base anymore. One thing I do like, I don't feel like he's second-guessing himself a ton. Like, I think when he feels like a decision needs to be made, he's ripping off the Band-Aid and doing it. He's not prolonging it. That's what I take on both of those things. And look, obviously he has made some wrong decisions this year. Things are not going smoothly to start his tenure. But I liked that confidence remains and just the conviction of, all right, I feel like this needs to happen. We're doing it. We're not waiting a week and filling it out more and thinking about it more. I'm going to talk about it with my staff. If I think this needs to happen, we're going to pull the Band-Aid now and go. Because both of those things felt quick. I think both were probably the right decision, but both of those things felt relatively quick, which makes me think that there was a lot of conviction behind those decisions.
No, I agree. I think that's a good point. Is that he's been, when the decision needs to be made, he's been all in. Definitely has some confidence to him, which is good. Tennessee will look to bounce back in SEC play this weekend against LSU. 3-game series against the defending national champs there in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. We'll have full coverage. Rocky Top Insider, both Ryan and I in the house. First time in a while, SEC series. The first time this year that'll be the case. as basketball season just recently ended. Game 1 on SEC Network. That's at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, a little bit earlier here on a Friday night. ESPN2 for Game 2. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then the normal 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, Easter Sunday, SEC Network Plus for that one. If you want to follow Ryan, you can do so at RyanSchumpert00 on X. I'm at Jack Foster Media. And of course, follow Rocky Top Insider at Rocky Top Insider on all of your social media platforms. And stay up to date with all of your Tennessee athletics coverage on RockyTopInsider.com. For Ryan, I'm Jack. We'll see you next time.